this was a team I thought that our fan base could really get behind and be proud of.
Welcome into the Scarlet Shootaround podcast, following the beat of Husker basketball. Here are your hosts, Blake and Mike.
All Huskers momentum has been erased following a heartbreaker loss, 87-82 in overtime in Piscataway. Hello, everybody, and welcome again into the Scarlet Shootaround podcast. My name is Blake, here with co-host Mike. I am finally in my home setup again after 2.5 weeks of madness, so quality should finally be restored. I'm in peace and quiet, no more hotel lobbies or whatever it may be. So excited to have good quality again. But Mike, how are you doing today?
Well, on that note, I'm glad I don't have to record with you being in a literal closet anymore. So that's a good note. But no, like you said, at least we always get it done. But as for how I'm doing, I've had better days. I had a pit in my stomach going to sleep last night after the game, and you sleep on everything and you think about it, and it sure felt like the sky was falling last night, but maybe it's not quite as bad. Obviously, the loss hurts, but we'll see. We'll see what they can make from the rest of the season. Obviously, we still have chances to make a run and make some noise. So it's not all over yet. Just trying to find the silver lining, and that's where I'm at.
And Mike, in this game, the silver linings are going to be very hard to come by. We've done some tough episodes. Obviously, Creighton was a heartbreaker. Minnesota was tough given that second half letdown. Wisconsin hurt, but this one just feels a little bit different and digs a little bit deeper. It just wasn't very good all around. But the hardest part of it was we got out-rebounded by, I think, 14 total and gave up 25 offensive rebounds, Mike. That's hard to even say out loud. And Fred commented on the lack of rebounding effort in this Rutgers game.
They're an incredibly physical team. It's everything that you talk about going into it is you have to find a way to match toughness with this group. That's what Steve Peichel hangs his hat on. It's what his teams do every time they step on the floor, and they just flat out toughed us tonight on the glass. And we got a tough game coming up in 2 days, so we can't have a hangover from this one. We got to get in the film room tomorrow and figure out what we can do better to find a way to grind out those rebounds. And, rebounding is all about heart and guts and toughness, and they beat us tonight in pretty much every way you can on the glass. 25 offensive rebounds. Obviously, you're not going to win a lot of games.
And, Mike, the rebounding effort, I don't think anybody has to say anything except it was, frankly, pathetic. Rutgers got every single offensive rebound that they wanted. It seemed like every possession they had second chance and sometimes even third chance points. What do you take away from the rebounding effort in this one from the Huskers?
No, like you said, it doesn't take a genius to point out that it was a rough rebounding night. As Coach said there, 25 offensive rebounds. You're not going to win a lot of games. I'll venture to say you're probably not going to win a single game if you're doing that in Big Ten play, it seems like, unless you're shooting 70% beyond the arc or something crazy like that to help counteract it. But yeah, tough. Obviously, Mast had a tough game. He was kind of getting bullied by Cliff Amoye the whole game, it seemed like. Our front court just struggled the whole game to pull down boards. And, yeah, it's tough getting out-rebounded by 14. They ended up with 12 more shots than us, Rutgers did. And it's just tough to win when you give a team that many chances. We talked about coming in that they're a pretty good rebounding team. They're a pretty good defensive team, and that definitely showed throughout the game. But it's a tough game. You lead for 30 minutes. You have every chance, every opportunity to put the game away. Multiple double-digit leads and just couldn't finish the job, which is tough. It's almost tougher. Obviously, like you mentioned, the Wisconsin and the Creighton episodes. It's tough getting blown out like that, but I think a close loss like this where you were in control of the game the whole time and then just couldn't finish down the stretch, I think that's almost a little bit tougher of a pill to swallow. So just tough rebounding performance. Obviously, Rutgers is pretty big. Hopefully we'll get some things resolved going forward, though.
You mentioned the lack of finishing in multiple aspects of this team. this game exemplified that, Mike. I believe, as you mentioned off the air, we had 2 separate 7-minute field goal droughts at the end of each half, and we blew 2 double-digit leads in each half. I mean, is that – did I say that right?
Yeah, 12-point lead in each half, and then I think it was 6.5 minutes left in the first. We made our last bucket. We had I think we scored 4 points off free throws through those last 6.5, and then set with 7 minutes left in the second half. I think we were up 11, something like that. We were at 65 points, and I know watching the game, you had said the number, just get to 75, you're fine. I'm like, yeah, just get to 70. And at that point, when they were at 50, I think they're at 54, is 65, 54. So get to 70 with 7 minutes left. I was like, yeah, I feel comfortable then. And turns out that went to overtime at 69. So if you just manage to score 5 points over the course of 7 minutes at the end of the second half, you win the game. But all the credit to Rutgers. We mentioned that that's what they do. They're a great defensive team. We can harp on or make fun of the rack all we want. I guess Jersey Mike's Arena now, but when it gets going, they're a pretty passionate fan base, and I think the crowd definitely helped them out there towards the end. And I know there were a couple offensive possessions for us where we just kind of looked a little lost down the stretch, which is tough to see. You just need one bucket to go in there, and the game's over, but just couldn't find one.
And I think that's one of the hardest parts about this game in general, is that despite everything that went down, the offensive rebounds, the foul trouble that we got into, the Gary injury, and we'll expand on that later. I tweeted out, it seemed like every single jump ball freak play went Rutgers' way. Anytime there was a scramble, Rutgers got it. Anytime, someone leaped out of bounds to save a ball, it ended up in a Rutgers player's hands that ends up in a 2-point basket or a 3-point goal from the corner. It just seemed like time and time again, nothing could go the Huskers' way. But after it all, we still had a chance at the end of that game to win it. We had a shot to get it. And Tominaga, threw up a tough 3 there to kind of round it out the game. And even at the end of the half there, the second half, we had an opportunity on a couple inbounds plays, very interesting inbounds plays, I guess, to say the least about it. But, we tried to throw a lob play to Bryce at the rim at the end of the game. And I think the play might have actually been there. I saw some breakdown on Twitter where I think Mast maybe missed a screen or something or other. But the play was there, but obviously tough pass and didn't end up getting down. So just such a heartbreaking game to lose, Mike, because this one, Iowa is a good team. They're, at home, they're tough to beat. But this Rutgers team, Mike, this Rutgers team is not good. I'm sorry, but this Rutgers team is not good. And this game was so winnable. We always talk about Big Ten conference games are tough on the road, but this game was so winnable, and it was in the palms of our hands for, like you said, almost the entirety of the game.
No, you're spot on. It's it's a tough loss. I know during the broadcast, the announcers had said, I think Rutgers has won something like 85% of their games at home over the last 5 years. So, tough place to play, but that's no excuse, to come out and, the way the Huskers played, they definitely played good enough to win, even like you mentioned, with all the lack of rebounding, all the problems that they may have had. They definitely played well enough to win, and just not be able to finish out it's tough. It's real tough, and hopefully the guys can rebound from it. It's a short break coming into the Northwestern game here, traveling back home to hopefully friendly confines in PBA, and maybe we can right the ship.
And so to update on the Gary injury situation, as we're recording this on Thursday night, Juwan Gary tweeted out about a half hour to an hour ago a prayer emoji with a smirk emoji and the words "thank you." So I'm assuming, we haven't heard anything official yet, Mike. I'm assuming that means that it's not a season-ending injury. It could be maybe anywhere from 1 game to 2 games to a week to a month. But it sounds like, if you're reading the tea leaves, that this isn't going to be a season-ending injury. And so let me ask you, how important do you think Juwan Gary is for this NCAA tournament push?
Oh, and I mean, incredibly important. And I hope it's not a month that he's out. Obviously, I think he brings, we want to talk about lack of rebounding. We saw what happens when he's not in the game. He brings so much on that end, defensive end, closing out possessions, grabbing boards, and on the offensive end too. I think he had 3 offensive rebounds in the game before he went out. So great rebounder, great defender. He does a lot for the team. I think he's a pivotal player that we need if we're trying to make the NCAA tournament. And I hope that his tweet means it's not season ending. We do need him back, as soon as possible, I think. Otherwise, by the time he gets back, I don't want to say the Huskers season will be over, but there's, couple big opportunities coming down the pipeline here early February, with Wisconsin and Illinois coming up. Not to look ahead for the next 3 games, but a couple opportunities for some big resume boosting wins. And if he's back for those, I'd feel a lot more comfortable. Obviously, his health always comes first, as I always say, bless all the knees and ankles, but just praying for him, hoping he can make a return, sooner rather than later.
And as necessary, we try to stay positive as much as we possibly can. So I want to throw out a couple performances that stuck out to at least me in this one. Bryce Williams went for 22, 6 and 2, 6 of 13 from the field, 4 of 8 from deep. I think it was the best player on the court we had the other night, and he added 3 steals to that stat line as well. CJ Wilcher went for 12, 2 and 2, hit 2 of his 5 3-point attempts, 50% from the field. He's getting better and better all the time. He loves the rack. He always shoots well there. And Mikey's up to 43% from 3 on the year, so he's really coming on in his junior season, but I feel like it's his 5th year for whatever odd reason. And then Sam Hoiberg came in and really gave us a chance at the end of this game, despite everything kind of falling apart. Had 2 3-pointers at the end of that game to, again, keep us close. You got to love the guy, always giving his heart and leaving his entire body on the floor no matter what the situation is. And his 3-point shot can be a real benefit to us off the bench as we continue on this stretch in the Big Ten season. So I want to round this out by sharing with everybody, after sleeping on it, Mike talked about a little bit of a 30-second sermon, if you will. This loss hurts. This loss hurts a lot. The Iowa loss hurt, but this loss hurts a lot more because it was so winnable. We had some people in our mention saying the season's over, the sky is falling, this team is not going to be the one that wins a game in March, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not calling anybody out in specific, but even I felt that way. Mike would attest as we watched it together that it was a very miserable watching experience for me personally, feeling defeated walking around the apartment. But I want to stress that this team has a pretty good resume up to this point. We have 3 quad 1 wins. We have 1 Q1A win against Purdue, which will be locked in. I'm guaranteeing you a Scarlet Shootaround guarantee that they will remain in the top 10 in the net throughout the entirety of the season because they're that good. And this team beat that team. Nebraska can beat anybody on their schedule any given night. Now, the problem, as we've seen time and time again, is the consistency factor, especially on the road. Can Nebraska find a way to get to 11-9 in conference? It seems like that's the most realistic opportunity to get into the tournament at this point, as 13-7 is probably unattainable with 3 conference losses already. But I just want to try to calm the waters and let everybody know that while the last week of Nebraska basketball has been miserable, this team is not done yet. We have good pieces. We have a good coaching staff. We have plenty of opportunities coming down the road. And keep in mind, this January stretch was always going to be the hardest stretch on our schedule. And we actually have done okay. We haven't done to the level that we wanted to be. But if you flip the 3-4 conference record to 4-3, I think we'd be pretty happy. So, losses hurt, and we're conditioned as Nebraska fans in general throughout the men's athletic department to be disappointed. But this team has plenty of games to be played. I ask that you don't give up on them, and I know we'll still tune in, and nobody's, I don't think, jumping off the ship yet. But let's show up Saturday. Let's support them for Northwestern. We're going to have Danny Nee in the house. Should be a rocking crowd for a Saturday afternoon game. And this is a game that can seriously get us right back on track to where we need to be. So we need to make sure that we win both of these next games, Northwestern and Ohio State at home. So that being said, let's round this out, the Rutgers side of it. Nebraska shoots 38% from the field, 37% from 3, 79% from the stripe, has 13 assists to 13 turnovers. Rutgers, on the other hand, shoots 38% from the field, 38% from 3, and shoots 53% from the free throw line, and again had 25 offensive rebounds. So we obviously had our thoughts to share, but let's get into what the viewers on Twitter had to share about this one.
So Husker fans, let's hear from you.
And there were a lot of them, Mike. I believe we had 27 replies on our tweet, which would be an all-time high for the podcast. So I want to thank everybody again for interacting with our Twitter, making sure to build this community. Even in a loss, it's fun to hear and see what everybody thinks live in real time, and we appreciate all of the camaraderie that comes with that. So, Mike, let's get into it. A lot of thoughts here. The first one I'm looking at, Jeremiah Lubery says, it's simple going forward. We're not tough enough right now, and we lost our toughest player. Obviously, this is prior to hearing the news that we had about Juwan Gary. Defensive intensity and rotations were much better, but then gave up we gave up offensive rebounds every possession. Don't get tougher. We're an NIT team. We would have taken that all at the start of the year. Get tougher. We're the NCAA tournament. What do you think about that comment, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, even Coach Hoiberg said in his quote, it's all heart when it comes to rebounding, and it's tough. Is obviously you can say that, but there is a skill to it and positioning and things of that nature. It was tough, especially in the second half. It seemed like Rutgers was just chucking up shots because they knew they were going to come down with the offensive rebound anyways, and it's just really disheartening to see that. And I can't imagine as a player having to go through that. So it's a tough position to be in for the players. I don't want to say that they're not tough. Obviously, these guys play their ass off every game. Is a tough game, and hopefully they come back and learn their lessons and bring a little bit of more of an edge. Like you said, we've seen it before. The Kansas State game, the Purdue game, where they battle down low and they do everything that they're supposed to do and that they need to do. So I know they have it in them. It's just we've harked on it a couple times now. It's just the consistency. Be nice to see it game in, game out, and hopefully they can get that figured out.
Ben Broderick says the bad losses are stacking up. Rutgers with 25 offensive boards, Minnesota doubling us up in the second half, Iowa and Wisconsin blowouts while trying to get some momentum going. Historically, we do not get the benefit of the doubt come Selection Sunday. And as much as you want to think that the committee doesn't look at things like that, they don't look at the logo on the resume, it matters, Mike. It just matters. And if you'd be beside yourself if you think a Gonzaga team that's on the bubble is going to get the benefit of the doubt over Nebraska. If you're talking about the last team in, it's just maybe it's just human nature. But there's just aspects of this that go into it. And Ben's right. We just cannot seem to get any kind of solidified momentum going. Every time we get going good and something good happens, we fall apart right after.
Yeah, it's tough to watch so far this season. I think he's spot on. It seems like we can't get out of our own way. It's a couple good performances and then a letdown and, a couple blowouts here or there. I don't want to say the bad losses are stacking up. I don't think we have that many bad losses. You can call Rutgers a bad loss if you want. I'd be willing to say that, but we've lost to some quality teams and that's going to happen. I prefer to look at the positive side. The win over Purdue, the win over K-State's looking better and better. Kansas State just beat Baylor the other day, so that win's looking really great. Michigan State's going to be Michigan State. They're, ranked highly in the metrics, so that's good. That's a great win. So the resume is what it is. I think the guys need to take care of business, though. I think he's spot on when it comes to Selection Sunday. You don't want to leave any doubt. You don't want to leave it up to the committee. You just want to have a resume so good that they can't leave you out type of deal. And we still have quite a few games to make that happen, and I have faith in the team.
Big Ten Gabriel says it's hard to win on the road, but good teams don't look this drastically different away from home. And Mooney Mania says if Ramel is good to go, it's time to take a bet on him. The Ramel thing, who knows what's going on? It obviously, and again, I hate to call out players or anything like that, but the coaching staff obviously must think that he is not capable of playing any quality minutes. I don't want to expand beyond that. I don't want to share any bad opinions. I mean, that's just the fact of the matter. But Mike, what do you think? Big Ten Gabriel again mentions the road toughness and the issues. What do you think in your mind is going on there?
And I don't know, really. It's hard because, we had this conversation after the Minnesota game. It seemed like, it's tough to win on the road. All this stuff is a drastic meltdown. But then they came back and they beat a great Kansas State team in a true road test. And I was going to say, they can win on the road. But now it's point after point on the resume now, on their body of work, that they can't win a Big Ten game on the road. They're 3-0 at home, but 0-4 on the road. It's hard to not say that it's, a thing that's, it's definitely a room or a point of concern, if you ask me. But they have, some relatively easier opponents. I said that about Rutgers, though, so you never know. I don't know. I'll remain hopeful that they get it figured out, but it's definitely a big concern of mine right now that they just can't seem to figure it out on the road and can't seem to figure out how to close a game, whether it's, the Minnesota game or the Rutgers game, or just not even the game at all. And as far as like Iowa and Wisconsin go. So it's been multiple ways and just can't quite figure it out yet.
Noah Post says Fred Hoiberg has consistently shown his inability to manage a basketball game. His usage of timeouts and bad inbounds plays show it. And Maddox Show says, when we miss the tournament, remember Coach Hoiberg inbounds plays at the end of regulation. The inbound plays, they really sucked in the moment, but I think after you digest it a little bit, you can kind of see the X's and O's of what was trying to go on. I don't think they were necessarily bad plays. Now, the end of the first half, that was unexplainable. I don't know what in the world happened with that. Maybe it was just a spur of the moment shot, but I don't think that was the design. But again, the end of game play, it's just chalked up to a bad inbounds pass. It happens, from time to time. But Mike, what do you think is going on? Mooney Mania also adds in, Fred can't effectively use timeouts. It's absurd. I don't really understand this. Fred had mentioned in a post-game press conference prior, I forget which game or when it was, that he doesn't, I think it was Minnesota, that he doesn't like to call timeouts. He likes to let the team figure it out almost like in an NBA fashion, but he just refuses, it seems, to use timeouts in times of need, as we blew two different 12-point leads, I believe. I don't really even have a question for you, Mike. I just expand on that thought. Why in your opinion, does Fred, lack the interest in using timeouts when we need them?
That's just his coaching style, I suppose. It's his mentality. It's how he wants to approach the use of them. Obviously, it makes fans want to pull their hair out a little bit when the other team's on a big run and you're screaming to just call a timeout just to give the guys a break and reset a bit. I don't know, though. It's definitely tough. I think, obviously, it's tough to go home with one in your pocket. I'm not going to sit here and have a knee-jerk reaction and say he doesn't know how to manage a basketball team. I think he's obviously a great coach. I think any coach around the nation will give him the utmost respect. I think he has a lot of respect among coaching circles. I think the players obviously respect him and what he's done. So it's hard to, poo-poo on Fred for how he wants to approach the game. It's definitely frustrating at times, though, but I guess as long as he's the coach at Nebraska, you just got to learn that that's how it's going to be, I suppose, and try not to stress about it too much. I'll tell you what, though, when it works out and the guys do get it figured out and they go on a little run and they answer with a little run, it feels great. Hopefully that happens more times than it doesn't, but when it doesn't work out and you get a meltdown and you give up a big run, it's definitely hard to watch.
Drew Urbon says, Mast was awful tonight. Team looked like they were just trying to preserve the lead with 7 minutes left instead of being aggressive. I could not agree more. Rutgers wanted it more, which showed on the glass. It was so maddening. I've never seen such piss-poor rebounding in my life. And, Mike, we kind of talked about it earlier, but this was Mast's easily worst game that he's played as a Husker. Do you think, how Rutgers was playing him defensively played a big role on that, or do you chalk this up to, you have to have a bad game once in a while?
I think it's a little bit of both. Rutgers might have been a tough matchup. Cliff Moyer is a great center. He's very big, very long. Obviously, Rutgers does great things on the defensive end, so he's always going to be a tough matchup overall. I know he had a couple great open looks for three that didn't get to go. If those drop, it's a different story. Obviously, I'm not going to sit here and say he didn't have a rough game. I think anybody could tell you that he had a rough game, but that's going to happen every once in a while. You got to remember that these guys are, they're college kids. And shit, even when it comes to professional sports, sometimes you just have off nights and that's how it goes. So hopefully he can bounce back and go back to what we've seen previously in some of the big games. I think about a Kansas State game where I think he ended up with 18 points. He's like leading the team. He's definitely more than capable of being that guy. He's done it for the majority of the season. So one bad game, it happens, in my opinion.
Huskin Fanatic says it's already been said, but that was a gut punch. Rebounding toughness was the biggest factor, even though we hit 13 3-pointers. Again, you really should not lose when you shoot that well from three. But here's something to look at moving forward as well. Lawrence, the starter, is shooting 25% from three and 33% from the field. But off the bench, Wilcher is 43% from three and 50% from the field. Hoiberg is 41% from three and 43% from the field. How long of a leash do we have to give Lawrence? And Mike, I love that he brought stats to this argument because they're pretty telling. I mean, Lawrence is just, we have how many data points now? 18 plus data points. And he's played well in some. I'm not saying he's played bad, overall. But if you look at the season numbers for what they are, Lawrence has been, I think it's fair to say, a massive disappointment to this point. And, obviously you can attribute that to, playing a position that he's not used to at the one and the lead guard. But I think we maybe need to start having this conversation. Like, the numbers just aren't good enough for what we want to do and where we want to be at the end of this year.
Yeah, Jamarcus has had a tough season so far. You hate to see it. As far as, bringing stats about people scoring or, shooting off the bench versus starting, in my mind, those are two completely different things. It's a different mindset coming in off the bench versus starting, I feel like. So there's a little bit of a disconnect to me if you're going to bring those stats, but Obviously Jamarcus has had, he's had his fair share of rough games. He's had some great games too. I'm not gonna say that he's been all terrible. You said it right. You said it right. He's not playing his natural position. He's trying to learn that point guard position. He's been trying to learn it the whole season, and it's just been a tough go. And I feel for the guy to kind of be thrust into a tough position like that and just try to learn a little bit trial by fire. It's not a position I envy. So I hope he can figure it out. I think he's hopefully learning game by game and figuring it out bit by bit. You want to talk about a short leash or whatever. I guess my question is, who are you going to bring in instead of him? I don't know if it's going to be Sam Hoiberg or a Boogie Coleman or who you want to replace him with, but I think he's played, his fair share of good games. Obviously it's easy to pick on him after a bad game or a not so great performance. I think that's a little bit unfair, after a tough game, but it is what it is. Like I said, I just don't know who you guys think, the minutes are going to go to, or if you have anybody in mind, Blake.
Yeah, I mean, there's just, you obviously have Boogie on the bench, but, for whatever reason that may be, Fred has kind of cut him from the rotation. So, he's had decent games passing, but he takes a lot of unwarranted shots. I just don't think there's an easy answer. And I guess the only thing I'd say to that conversation is I love Jamarcus Lawrence. What he gave to this team last year was fantastic. He was such a great three-point shooter, and he can do it, again. But this transition to the lead guard has been so tough on him, and I want to echo your sentiment. You just feel for the guy. He's not playing his natural position. He's being asked to do a lot of things he's never done before. So I'm not going to give up on Jamarcus Lawrence as a player. Now, as a point guard, we may need to make a switch to get to where we need to be. I just, I don't know that who we switch to would be a whole lot better. I think that's the thing that we need to make sure we take note of in this. But at the end of the day, we love Jamarcus Lawrence, and he's a great basketball player. I just want to make sure that that's emphasized. Rounding it out, Chrissy Joy says, this game sucked. I hope Juwan is okay and not in a lot of pain. I think his exit deflated this team a little bit. The refs sucked per usual. Somebody fixed the Husker app for the love. I'm unfamiliar with what's going on there, but the worst part for me is seeing people kiss coach's butt when we win and tear him up when we lose. And, it does suck. I think a lot of this stems from Fred, for lack of a better term, kind of being on a contract year. It's obviously been publicized. He took a little bit of a salary cut. I never actually am sure if that got reinstated or not. I don't think it did, but I'm not totally for certain on that. But, people know and understand, and I think Fred understands that this is a huge season for his job security. So I think a lot of that scrutiny has a lot of fans on, short leash.
It's kind of I almost want to echo what I just said about Jamarcus. I feel for the guy, and I think that comment is exactly right. It's tough to see him get praise. There's your statement win, Fred Hoiberg, after a big Purdue loss, and then two big Purdue win, excuse me, and then a couple games later, people are almost calling for his head again. So I understand it though. Fans, it's short for fanatic, which means they're fickle and they care a lot, and I think that's a good thing overall. But yeah, it's obviously a tough position to be in. I think he's a great coach. I had said that earlier, and I have all the faith in him, and I think you've definitely seen progress year after year, at least definitely on the defensive end, kind of figuring out what he wants to build here. And hopefully, he can figure it out at least for the rest of this year. And if the AD wants to keep him going forward, I'd be more than happy with that. And then keep it rolling. I think he's had a great year so far this year. Obviously, the last two losses hurt, but this is one of our best starts in a long time. You can go back to some of the earlier episodes, and I was given some pretty fun historic stats. I haven't recently, but yeah, it's been a good year. I know it's hard to say that after a couple tough losses, but I think we all need to take a step back a little bit and kind of realize we're, obviously 3-4 in conference, but our overall record and body of work looks pretty good. We have some pretty quality wins, and there's a lot of season left.
So I want to thank everybody again for contributing into our Huskers Let's Hear From You segment. If you'd like your thoughts shared on the show, make sure to go onto Twitter and follow us at Scarlet Shoot Pod. We post that tweet right after the final buzzer of every single game, whether win or loss. And anytime we have a Big Ten win, we make sure to give away a Scarlet Shootaround sweater. If you're on YouTube, you can see that I'm wearing right now to any random commenter on that tweet. So one of the most fun things we do, again, connecting with our audience. We'd love, if you're not part of that, to make sure you join after every single game. After that said, Mike, let's transition into our Beau Reid interview.
You are listening to the Scarlet Shootaround podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back into the Scarlet Shootaround podcast. With me here for our special guest interview for Alumni Weekend, Mr. Beau Reid. Beau, how are you doing today?
Doing well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, excited to have you on the show. I heard you might be walking over there. I think you've taken part in a couple of the Alumni Weekends, so really excited that you're able to join us and talk about your experience as a Husker for a little bit. So just got a couple questions for you. Obviously, you were a part of that really good 90-91 team that most would consider the best to ever play for Nebraska. What could you say to the talent and chemistry on that team, and how many of your teammates are you going to run into here over the weekend?
I think there'll be a fair amount of people that come back. I've heard that it's going to be a record turnout for alumni because a lot of people are excited to see Coach Nee. So I've talked to probably 15 to 20 people, just whether it was guys I played with as a freshman or guys I played with from my sophomore through senior years. So lots of people coming back, really excited about it. That 90-91 team was special, because there was a lot of talent sitting out the year before. I had injured my knee and didn't play most of my junior year. Farmer was sitting out. Piakowski was sitting out. Chubbuck was sitting out. So there was like a lot of pieces to the puzzle. Ramos came later. So there was all these 4 or 5 pieces that were on the sideline. So most people didn't have any idea how much talent that team had because we hadn't really played together before. And, honestly, I think the struggles of the year before when I was hurt that junior year really helped kind of light the fire that allowed a lot of people to play for the team first and themselves and their statistics and their potential pro career second.
Very neat. So what would you say, and if it's a part of that team, obviously, then go ahead, but what would you say was your favorite moment during your Husker career?
Oh, there's kind of a lot of it. It's hard to kind of point out one moment. The Michigan State game at home where we won and they were ranked 5th. I think that victory, after coming back from the San Juan shootout where we lost by a few points to Murray State in the championship game, all of a sudden that game made us realize that we could play the game at a really high level and be a really good team. And it sent us on our way. I think we had a 14-game winning streak after that. And, a lot of it was because we got the confidence of going toe-to-toe with a top 5 team that had 3 NBA players on it. And, we battled back and forth with them the entire game and found a way to win at the end. And so that was a great memory. I remember the feeling of hearing them call our name as a 3 seed. That was pretty cool. It felt like an entire career work to get to that tournament. And we had finally gotten there and we were ranked in the top 10. We finished the year 9th and we're a 3 seed in the tournament. And, all of those things are great memories. So
there were a couple big wins during that season, including winning in Norman at number 13 Oklahoma, 111-99, and beating number 10 Kansas at home to end the regular season, 85-75. What are your remembrances and takeaways from those couple games?
The Oklahoma game I remember well because we had never won down there. In fact, one of the first road games I ever went on as a redshirt, we got beat something like 130-103 or something like that. It was crazy. Coach Nee got thrown out of the game, and they were just really, really good. And I just remember that game because of the pace that it was played at. It was a lot of fun to play in that game. And I just remember Billy Tubbs just yelling at his guys, why can't you guard him? Why can't you guard him? Why aren't you guarding him? Why can't we guard anyone? He just kept yelling it. And it was a lot of fun because every time we'd come out of a timeout, we'd run a set play and it would work. And it was a lot of fun. Just from every part of that trip was fun. The road trip down, that's the site of the infamous one-on-one game between Benji and our sports information director, Nick. And it was like something out of a movie, just how bad the basketball was in that one-on-one game. But it was the kind of fun that we were having as a team. The coaches were cheering. Everybody was gathered around. Our shoot-around turned into their one-on-one game. It was hysterical. And so that team kind of rolled like that. We got a little confidence and we were pretty loose. But when the whistle blew, everybody's egos went away on that team, and everybody played because we wanted to prove everyone wrong. So we were picked dead last in the Big 8 that year.
Isn't that amazing how expectations can change once you get a couple big wins? Super fun to follow. You mentioned Danny Nee. Give us a glimpse into what it was like playing for Danny Nee in those golden years down there.
Well, when we got good, Coach Nee was a lot of fun. He gave you a lot of latitude to play the game. He gave you a lot of latitude off the floor too. When we were losing, he wasn't very much fun at all. He was like a caged animal at one point because, going into that year, his back was kind of against the wall, and they were talking about potentially making a change with Coach Nee. And so he was a bear at times in practice, which I think now that I'm old enough to understand what the pressure of having an income is like, I can kind of see why he was a little on edge. He's getting crucified in the media. These guys stink, blah, blah, blah. And, but once we got really good, I always joke with Eric Piatkowski, he got the best version of Coach Nee because they were good every year. And so he wasn't fighting for his job. He was established, and it was a lot of fun for a lot of that. So we had a great year. Coach Nee, I always tell people, the story I tell people is that when we called timeout in the Michigan State game and we were losing by 1, and the place is to the rafters in the Devaney Center, there's 14,500 people there. It's loud. It's crazy. We call timeout. We have the basketball. There's like 7 seconds left, and he didn't let us sit down. We were standing there, and he was standing out on the court waiting for us when he called the timeout. And he was just grinning. And, we're all like, what are you grinning about? He goes, what did I tell you guys? I told you you're going to play in games like this. Look at this place. And, it was just, and then he says, we're going to win this effing game, so what are we running? And we ran a play that we had run multiple times throughout my career at Nebraska. It was named after Brian Carr. We just called it BC. And the guy that takes the ball out of bounds on the side has a couple of options. He can throw it straight into the post. He can throw it to the corner. He can throw it to the top of the key. But in every situation, if nobody's guarding the guy taking the ball out of the bounds, which Michigan State didn't guard me, then the inbounding player steps in and gets ready to take a shot. So, I stepped right into a wide open 3. And, we ran that play, Brian Carr, we ran that play for him to beat Oklahoma State when I was a redshirt. So it was just kind of fun. And then, that win kick-started a lot of fun. And, but Coach Nee could be difficult too. When he really got mad, he got really personal a lot of times. And so, the kids nowadays would run for the transfer portal, I'm afraid.
So do you have one specific Danny Nee memory that sticks out to you over the years?
No, not really. It's been a long time. I just, he was, some of the stuff that he would do and say, we look back on now and laugh, but at the time it didn't seem all that funny. There was one time where we were doing this was my freshman year, and it was Anthony Bayless and Keith Newbert and, Brian Carr, Bill Jackman, T. Buchanan, Derek Vick, and we're just practicing terrible, and it's a coach's clinic at the Devaney Center. And Coach Nee got so pissed, he literally made us run line drills for 45 minutes while he talked to all the coaches. And he goes, I'm sorry, I'm not going to make you watch this. This is embarrassing. He said, these guys aren't ready to practice. He's like, so you can watch them run, but I'll talk. And he talked the whole time while we ran. And he goes, you effers keep running. I don't care if you start puking. And he made us run the whole time.
The guy with some edge, as we all very well remember.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
You kind of talked about people would run to the transfer portal. What's your opinion on how college basketball has kind of changed with the transfer portal and NIL and all those types of things?
A little bit of both for me. The romance around it's gone. It's business, right? And as a business, the beautiful thing about the transfer portal is, basketball, unlike football, you can transform your program with 2 players. Football, you need a lot of players. You need players on both sides of the line of scrimmage. You need skill guys. You need really differentiated people to change the trajectory of your program. Basketball, 2 players can take you to the Final Four. I mean, it's a little exciting at times to think, you scratch a check and all of a sudden you have 2 guys that can finish in the top 4 in the Big Ten, and now you're playing in the tournament to win games and not just make the tournament. So, I can see the value both ways. Am I a little jealous of the guys getting paid now? Yeah, I'm a little jealous, especially when we haven't had very many guys that have had very much success and they're making a fair amount of money. So I look back and think, what would we have made, with how much, Pikowski and I laugh about that all the time. I'm like, Pike, how much money would you get paid now in the NIL? Oh my gosh, but it's definitely a different time. And, as a person who played the game, it's still the game, and so when you see us play at a really high level against Purdue, it still feels good. It's still what you love, and so that part was really fun.
So how closely do you still follow the teams that we've kind of had over the past 2 decades plus since you've played? And what, if you do follow them pretty closely, what have you taken away from this season and what do you think they can accomplish?
Well, I've followed the teams closely ever since I've been done. I've had season tickets, I think, for close to 20 years. So I would say Fred's team this year is the deepest team he's had. And I think the Iowa game last night is a great example. We started off down 17-2, and there were some guys that just looked like they had tired legs. I felt like Williams had tired legs. I felt like some of the other guys just didn't have the same level of energy that they had against Purdue. Well, he brought in 4 other guys, and Alec brought some energy, and Rink was playing well, so he left him in, and all of a sudden you got some guys on the floor that had some energy, that wanted to play. The Rice kids stepped in, had a great first half. He hasn't had that kind of depth before, that if we showed up and just laid an egg, we didn't have enough depth to change up the combinations and find a combination that would give you that energy. And so even though ultimately the zone unraveled us, I was proud of the way they got back in the game, and it was all role players off the bench that helped us get back in it. And so, I think this gives Fred his best chance at winning a lot of games this year. I talked to Coach McDermott after Creighton gave it to us pretty good, and he said, Fred's going to win a lot of games with these kids this year. He's got a good group. So I thought that was a really nice compliment from Coach Mack. And, I'm excited to see what it brings. The Iowa loss, obviously, I think you could tell that the kids got caught up in shooting 62% from 3-point against Purdue and thought that they could just shoot it. But the subtle little difference was against Purdue, the ball was going in to the lane, whether it was a dribble drive or a pass into their defense, and then it was coming back out. And guys shoot the ball better when the ball goes in and comes back out, as opposed to just passing around the perimeter and jacking it up. It just seems like that never works. And in the second half, we were killing Iowa with dribble penetration, and we were starting to find a rhythm. And they did a smart thing. They went to a zone and forced us to take those perimeter shots without any inside-out action, and we didn't make very many in the second half. It was an interesting coaching move. You don't see a lot of people play zone anymore, and it was pretty cool. So we'll learn from that. We'll get better.
So from last question, then obviously, we have Northwestern here over the Alumni Weekend. Now we're recording a little bit early, week out from that, but Northwestern today almost shocked Wisconsin on the road. So they're obviously looking like a pretty good team this year. What do you predict for a score in that game?
Northwestern is a very similar team to us. They beat Purdue in a very similar way that we did. They're very physical. They've got a nice inside-out combination. They've got some very, very tenured guards. The Bowie kid feels like he's been there 6-7 years. I mean, he's been there forever. He's a really good player. He's all been Big Ten type kid. And then their bigs can all shoot and move, much like the kids at Iowa last night. So, Northwestern is going to be a challenge for us because they're a mirror image. We play very similarly. We play hard-nosed basketball. The ball moves. They've got skilled guys. They've got older, mature seniors. So it'll be a tough game. It's a game we have to win.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, Bo. We really appreciate it.
All right.
Hope you have a fun weekend through Alumni Weekend, and hope you get to meet a lot of cool people, and really excited that Coach Nee's in the building. I think we're going to attract a lot of people in the building.
It's going to be awesome. It's going to be electric. There's going to be a lot of people back in town. It'll be exciting.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us, Bo.
Right. Yep,
Let's
thanks.
transition into our preview of Northwestern.
You are listening to the Scarlet Shootaround podcast.
But before we get into that, Mike, we have an ad sponsor to share.
Yeah, this segment is brought to you by Tax and Business Consultants, providing all the tax, accounting, payroll, and consulting that your business needs. They partner with you to specifically tailor strategies suited to you and your business. Committed to positive client outcomes since 1961, they have been relieving stress related to taxes in all forms. Their offices are located in Blair, Columbus, and Lyons, so give them a call at 402-426-4144 or their website at www.tbc.tax. That is T as in Tominaga, B as in Bryce Williams, and C as in Coach Hoiberg.tax. Once again, that phone number is 402-426-4144. Give them a call and go Big Red.
All right, Mike. So I want to thank again TBC for sponsoring us in this segment of the show. We really appreciate everything they do for us. And if there is anybody else listening to this that is interested in sponsoring us, just shoot us a tweet, DM, or email scarletshootaround@gmail.com. I want to thank Beau Reid again for coming on to the show. He does, I'm very excited that we had an opportunity to get him on here. He shared a lot of cool stories with Danny Nee and some of the takes he had on Nebraska and the NIL were always very interesting to hear from a former player. So I want to thank Beau Reid again for coming on the show. It was very interesting to hear what he had to say. That being said, Mike, let's get into the Northwestern side of things as I flip my page into the mic. I apologize. Northwestern 13-4 on the year, 4-2 in conference, 59th in KenPom, 73rd in the net rankings. They are currently 3rd in the Big Ten standings. Offensively on KenPom, they are 54th. Defensively, they are 82nd, and they play at a very slow snail's pace, the 335th tempo in the country. Notable wins for Northwestern. Number 2, Purdue at home notched a victory 92-88 in overtime. Number 18, Michigan State at home 88-74, and they beat number 32, Dayton at home 71-66. On the other side of the ledger, notable losses include number 11, Wisconsin on the road 71-63, number 12, Illinois on the road 96-66 in a blowout, and a very, very tough loss, which I think is holding Northwestern back mightily. Loss at home to number 289 Chicago State 75-73. So, Mike, as you look into this Northwestern team, what do you take from this Wildcats squad from a bird's eye view?
Yeah, I think you're spot on, honestly, with that Chicago State loss definitely holding them back. I know the metrics and all the rankings would like them a lot more if they didn't lose that game. So this is a solid team. As you had mentioned, they play at a very slow pace, 335th in the country, or 335th in the country, 281st on offense, 346th on defense. So they're gonna draw out those defensive possessions a lot, kind of like Rutgers did. They're not quite as good on that end, still pretty decent, as you'd mentioned, 82nd on defense. So pretty good there. They on the defensive end, one thing that really stands out to me is they generate a lot of steals. They're 34th in the country in turnover percentage. And that's both steals and non-steal turnover percent, top 50 in steals and top, 65 in non-steal turnover percent. So they're going to turn the ball, or they're going to force turnovers a lot, and the Huskers are going to have to take care of the ball. I think they did a pretty decent job against a tough matchup with Rutgers. Obviously, we talked about how good Rutgers is on the defensive end. But, Northwestern's another team that's going to try to poke the ball away, get, free buckets on transition points. So Huskers are going to have to take care of the ball and shoot the ball well, as they've done at PBA this season.
And Mike, it all starts with what we've coined multiple times now, Grandpa Boo Buie. He is a super senior, 6'2", averaging 18, 4, and 5. He's shooting 45% from the field, 36% from three. He was first team All Big Ten last year, and he's most likely the best point guard in the conference. He's manned side by side by Ty Berry, a 6'3" senior, averaging 12, 4, and 1, shooting 47% from the field, a whopping 43% from deep. And he's also a good defensive player, and he's a three-point specialist. He's averaging 1.6 steals a game. And rounding out their big three is Brooks Barnheiser, a 6'6" junior, averaging 14, 7, and 3, shooting 43% from the field, 32% from three. He's their leading rebounder, good defender, and he's also averaging about 2 steals a game. So, Mike, you mentioned this team is very, very good on the defensive end when it comes to steals. They play a very aggressive style, but it can cost them a little bit. They're 34th nationally in defensive turnover percentage, but they are 178th in 2-point defense and 260th in 3-point defense. So I think they play, now talent-wise, obviously far different, but they play a style very similar to what we saw with South Carolina State. They jump passing lanes. They play super aggressive, but on-ball defense might be a little bit of an issue for them.
No, I think you're spot on. Yeah, they're going to try to live in the passing lanes, active hands, try to poke that ball away. Of note, if they're not getting those takeaways, you mentioned that they're pretty low down as far as defensive field goal shooting percentage, pretty far down in 3-point. Like you said, they're giving up nearly 35% from three. They also give up a lot of assists on made field goals. They're 299th in the country. So as long as the Huskers are able to, drive and kick, swing the ball around, find an open look, I like their chances. Just got to be smart with it when rotating the ball, because as we mentioned, a couple times now, they're going to try to jump passes. So even on a drive and kick situation, when we have, plus numbers on the outside swinging the ball around to find the open shooter, they're not going to necessarily close out to a shooter. They might try to predict that pass and jump the passing lane instead of closing out that way. So just something to note. You'd mentioned Boo Buie. Obviously, he's incredible. You look at the game plan for them. They're 45th in the country for, points coming from their point guard position. So if you stop him, you're going to stop a lot of their offense and a lot what they want to do. The difficult part is stopping him. Obviously, he's an incredible talent. He's a great player and very veteran. He knows how to do, how to get the shots he wants, how to get into position and get the offense humming the way he wants. So pretty tough matchup in that aspect. But like you mentioned, if the Huskers, are able to shoot in, the 3 effectively, if they're able to shoot the 2 effectively, make some bunnies, make their free throws when those opportunities come, I think they have a pretty good chance of taking care of business.
And Mike, I mentioned earlier, this team plays at a snail's pace, 335th in tempo total. On the defensive side of this thing, they rank 346th nationally in defensive length of possession, which from defensively, that's very, very good as opposed to being bad. They really drag out possessions. They make you, use the entire shot clock to try to find a good look. But that being said, they do foul often. They're 280th nationally in free throws attempted per field goals attempted at 37.4%. So along with that aggressive steal style of defense, they will get into some foul trouble quite a bit throughout the course of their games. And they don't rebound great. They're 170th nationally in defensive rebounding, so there is a window there of opportunity for Nebraska if they can find a little bit of a rebounding edge. Now, offensively, they play pretty smart. They have very low turnovers. They're 22nd nationally in offensive turnover percentage at only 14%. Again, they play slow and in the half court. They're 281st in offensive tempo, and they have lots of assists, 24th nationally in assists per field goal made at 61%. They're pretty good shooters in general. They're 96 nationally from 2, but they're 48th nationally from 3. But they do not crash the offensive glass either. They are 284th nationally in offensive rebounding percentage. So again, a team that's going to draw out the shot clock on both sides. They want to play at a slow tempo. They want to take their time as they play. Mike, how do you think their pace of play fits into what Fred and the Huskers want to do in this one?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think the Huskers probably want to play at a faster pace. That's not too surprising to anybody. And I think we saw it a little bit in the Rutgers game there. Obviously, as we mentioned, the result isn't what it was. But for a while there, Rutgers it was almost by their design when they were kind of going on a little run. They wanted to pick up the pace. And I think that's a situation where the Huskers would thrive better. So we'll see. It's worrying. We mentioned those long scoring droughts at the end of each half. If something like that happens against Northwestern with these long possessions that they like to draw out on the defensive end, that's something to worry about. But, I'm looking at conference stats right now, and they're actually the worst defense in the conference so far in conference play. So there's a little bit of, light there. They haven't played well in the Big Ten on the defensive side. So I like, what the Huskers are going to try to bring. Obviously, the loss of Juwan Gary hurts, but having a couple days to, try to get a game plan in, knowing he's not going to be able to, he's not going to be available. Maybe the coaches will have a better idea of what they want to do without him in the lineup. So we'll see. We'll see what the Huskers bring. I like their odds. I think this is probably going to be a pretty high scoring game personally. And we'll see what happens. I hope the Huskers can pull it out though.
And I would be remiss if I didn't make mention of Ryan Langborg, their 6'4" senior, averaging 11, 3, and 3, shooting 43% from the field and 38% from 3. Kind of a Swiss Army knife. He's a transfer in from Princeton and a really nice ad for Chris Collins' squad. He's another 3-point threat. 2 years ago, he shot 40% from deep. Last year, a little bit off. I want to say 32% off the top of my head, but he's starting to find that 3-point shot again. So, another weapon that we're going to have to watch, and another senior, which is a trend on this team. Northwestern, of their top 6, has 4 seniors and a junior, so a very, very veteran squad. They don't go super deep into their bench with quality minutes, but those seniors know how to play together and without too much relief in general throughout the course of the game. So, Mike, Ken Pom projects a 75-71 Nebraska win in this one. Bart Torvik, 75-70 Nebraska win. Now, these haven't been as super accurate as we may have thought they've been based on the metrics. So let's bump it down a little bit and say Nebraska minus 2.5. Where do you feel on that line?
It's tough after the last couple of games, but I think, as I mentioned, coming back home, friendly confines, Northwestern just played a game the same day we did on the 17th, so they're not having any extra rest. They're on a short break too. I like the Huskers, as I mentioned. I think it's probably going to be high scoring. I'm going to say Huskers 88, Northwestern 82.
I'm actually going to take Northwestern in this one with the points. I think, Mike, this is a veteran team that plays the turnover game very well. When you're trying to limit offensive turnovers, you need veterans on the squad and you need a really good point guard. That's where it all starts, as we very well know. And not to take a jab at Jamarcus Lawrence, but we don't have a true point guard on this team right now. So we're kind of seeing the lack of benefit and the pain from that. Can we get key players for Northwestern in foul trouble? They have 3 to 4 serious offensive threats, but beyond that, they don't have much. Again, I mentioned they don't go super deep into their bench. Their scoring is not very spread out in general once you get past those top three pieces. So we need to try to test their depth and get some of their better players in foul trouble. And the last question I have is, can Nebraska find that rebounding tenacity that they had against Kansas State and against Purdue? I think there's going to be an opportunity here on both sides of the floor for Nebraska to almost play a Rutgers type of game where you crash the glass, find some offensive boards, and make sure you limit those on the other side. And, as Fred talked about in the quote earlier in this episode, it comes down to heart, effort, and will. And can Nebraska find it at home in the friendly confines of PBA, find that effort amongst the crowd to put forth a quality rebounding effort when we need it most, and our back is, hypothetically a little bit against the wall in this one. So I'm going to predict the score 79-77 Northwestern win. I hope I'm wrong, but I have to play a little bit of the momentum game in this one. So that will finish it for our Northwestern preview. We will catch you on the other side and get you out of here.
You are listening to the Scarlet Shootaround podcast.
But Mike, you never want to put too much pressure on one singular game, but this Northwestern one is very, very, very important, not just to the trend of our season as we progress, but toward our NCAA tournament hopes after an 0-2 road trip.
Yeah, no, this is it's kind of a little bit do or die, in my opinion. After the game yesterday, we talked. I think, me personally, I think you got to win the next 3, and then one of Wisconsin or Illinois, and that'll get me feeling pretty good about where we're at. But it all starts, I say it every episode, one game at a time. It all starts with this game, Saturday against Northwestern at home. As you'd mentioned, they're a tough, experienced team. They don't play a lot of depth, so it's going to be those main guys out on the floor, and it's just about how the Huskers decide to defend them and if they can get the job done. So we'll see. Always hopeful. Always going to be looking for the silver linings and always praying for a better performance. And I'm going to remain hopeful until the Huskers really give me a reason not to, because apparently I still am after the last 2 games. So
make sure you follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Scarlet Shoot Pod on all of the above. On Twitter, we post anything in regards to roster updates, injury updates, metric changes, tournament projections, all the good stuff that you could ever ask for with Nebraska basketball. On Instagram, more of a fun thing. We share any kind of pictures that we may be involved with throughout the season. And on YouTube, Mike is in charge of that. We post the YouTube video podcast a day or 2 after they launch on your Spotify or Apple podcasting platform. So make sure you subscribe there for any video podcasts. They're a good watch. They've been getting more and more traction with every single episode. Mike, this is just a really big one. Let's go out. Let's get it done. Let's get some momentum rolling in this one, and let's keep this thing rolling, firing at a hopeful NCAA tournament bid. For myself, Blake, and Mike on the other side, go Big Red.
Go Big Red, baby.